Hi, everyone. My name's Alexis Alloway. I'm a local Avalanche educator here in Bozeman, and I'm here today from the Friends of the GNFAC to talk to you about backcountry gear. Today, our goals for this talk are to review the necessary equipment that you need to take with you for safe travel in the backcountry. We're going to help you understand the limitations of your gear, and we're also going to highlight the importance of practicing regularly and also making sure that you properly maintain and upgrade your gear as well. I will be the first to tell you that skiing in the winter in the backcountry is one of my favorite things to do. But I also recognize that when I'm going out in winter, I'm going into a high risk environment. Unfortunately, in the winter, temperatures are colder. Weather can be pretty extreme with winds and storms and poor visibility. It can be really difficult to access different places in the backcountry. And the consequences of a mishap in the winter, even something as basic as a broken ankle, can be much more severe than the consequences if that mishap occurs during the summer. So when we're going out into the backcountry in the winter, carrying the right gear is a tool that we can use to minimize risk. Having the right gear can both help us prevent being involved in accidents, and then it also gives us the tools to fix a problem if one should occur. So let's talk about gear we should be carrying. Most people, even beginners, understand that anyone going out into avalanche terrain in the winter needs to have our holy trio, a beacon or an avalanche transceiver, a probe, and a shovel. And it's not like this gear can be distributed throughout the group. Every single person in the group needs to have all three pieces of equipment. We need the beacon to find other beacons. We need the probe to pinpoint exactly where someone is under the snow, and we need a shovel to be able to reach them. So let's start by talking about avalanche transceivers. Avalanche transceivers come in a couple different models, and all transceivers have two basic functions. They can transmit a signal that they give off, and then they can switch over into a search mode where they can pick up and receive and search for a signal of other beacons. And basically, when it comes to your avalanche transceiver, I'd say the most important things to think about are you probably don't want to get a used one or inherit one because it could be old and outdated, or it also could not be functioning properly. So I strongly advise buying a new transceiver. This way you can register it with the manufacturer. You can get updated about recalls, warranty issues, or firmware updates for the transceiver. And you also want to make sure that you have a modern transceiver that has a triple internal antennas built into it. I do see a lot of old school dual antenna beacons. At this point, those should be retired. When it comes to our avalanche transceiver, an important part of it functioning properly is just making sure that it has good batteries. We do want to use alkaline batteries and not lithium or rechargeables because they can lose juice really quickly. So I use my alkaline batteries, and I also want to make sure that if I'm storing my beacon for the summer and it's not going to be used for a long period of time, that I do remove those batteries, because if I don't, they can leak and cause damage to the battery compartment. When it comes to wearing my avalanche transceiver, wearing it properly is an important part of it functioning correctly. So you've got two basic options. Some people like to wear their transceiver in the harness that it comes with on their torso, as shown in this picture. And then other people like to carry their beacon in a pants pocket. If you are using a pants pocket, you want to make sure that it's not an external pocket sewn onto the pants. It needs to be an internal pocket, and it should have a clip because you're going to want to clip the tether of that beacon to make sure that you don't lose it in the event that you drop it. Whether you choose to wear your beacon in either way is definitely going to depend on your manufacturer's instructions. So when you get a transceiver, read through the manual. For some models, you do need to wear them a certain way. And then you are going to want to consider the pros and cons of torso versus pants pocket to figure out what's going to work best for you. One thing to think about when we're wearing our beacon is just being aware that other things that we're wearing can interfere with it. And we want to minimize that interference from happening. So basically, what we need to realize is that any electronic devices we have, like radios or cell phones or GoPro cameras or whatever, those can cause interference, as well as metallic objects and magnetic objects. So we really want to avoid getting heated gear, like heated gloves, for example, or heated socks or heated vests. And then really important to minimizing interference is making sure when we're wearing our transceiver on our body that we're keeping it 20 centimeters, which is basically from my thumb to my pinky, keeping it 20 centimeters distance away from those interfering objects. So I personally like to wear my beacon in its harness, and then I make sure that my cell phone is down in my pocket on my thigh, located more than 20 centimeters away. And I also make sure that my radio is tucked up next to my shoulder, where it's also stowed properly away. If you do need to use your transceiver to perform a search, it is especially susceptible to electronic interference. And when it comes to search, I want to minimize interference by turning off any of those interfering devices like phones, radios, etc., storing them in my backpack. And then I want to use distance to minimize interference. So holding that beacon full arm's length out in front of my body. A final thing to think about with our transceiver is I can't emphasize enough the importance of doing a thorough transceiver check every single time you depart a trailhead. So we have another video that'll go over the details of our trailhead check. We have an acronym or a checklist called DBEST. And what we're going to do with our group is make sure that everyone's display is working properly, that they're not getting any error codes or seeing anything looking wrong. We want to make sure our battery life is at least 50%. We want to minimize electronic interference. So we want to really look at where we're carrying things, making sure each device is at least 20 centimeters away from our transmitting beacon. Electronic interference is also a good reminder to turn our cell phones into airplane mode to save the battery of the cell phone. And then finally, we want to test every single beacon in our group to make sure that it can search and that it also can transmit. And we want to double check that everyone is transmitting as they depart the trailhead. Okay. Now that we've gone over beacons, we're going to now take a look at a much simpler piece of gear, and that's our probe. So everybody going the backcountry should have a probe, and things to look for are just making sure you get a legit collapsible dedicated Avalanche probe. We recommend a minimum length of 240 centimeters, and just make sure that your probe has a locking mechanism that you're able to operate properly when you're wearing your gloves. And finally, we've got our transceiver, we've got our probe. The final thing to think about in our holy trio is our shovel. So when it comes to shovels, you are going to want to get something that's metal, not plastic. You're going to want to make sure it has an extendable handle. And then when it comes to shovels, size does matter. And that's the size of your shovel blade. If you find yourself having to shovel out an avalanche victim where time is of the essence, having a teeny tiny teaspoon-sized shovel blade is not going to get the results that you want. So you want to make sure maybe you don't need the biggest shovel out there, but you definitely don't want to get the smallest. And then I highly recommend picking a model that has the ability to transition to what we call hoe mode, which you can see in this picture, where by changing the orientation of the blade, we can actually clear a lot more snow a lot faster in this more ergonomic configuration. Okay, so that's it when it comes to our basic rescue gear. We always need to have shovel, beacon, and probe. And now I need to emphasize that you don't only need to get the gear for it to be effective, you also need to know how to use it. So as an educator, I definitely see a common challenge for people is they don't have familiarity and practice with their gear. So what that's going to look like is you're going to want to practice on your own, practice assembling your probe, practice disassembling it, practice working through the different functions of your transceiver, go through the owner's manual, and really spend a couple hours figuring out how it works. And then you're also going to get practice by taking rescue courses and clinics. If you go to the GNFAC's website, montanaavalanche.com, the education calendar has all kinds of different upcoming educational opportunities. So that's companion rescue skills clinics, as well as full-day rescue courses. In addition to formal courses, take advantage of our local beacon parks. So Bridger Bowl and Big Sky ski areas have them. We typically put one in at Story Mill Community Park in Bozeman, as well as MSU every year. So those are places where you can go practice using your transceiver and using the equipment they have there to help you do that. And then finally, it's also really important to practice with your friends. When it comes to rescue skills, they are use it or lose it. And taking courses isn't enough. You need to be practicing multiple times throughout the season, every season, year after year, in order to be really dialed with these skills. Okay, so I've got my shovel, beacon, and probe, but that's definitely not everything I need to have a safe day out in the backcountry. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to go over some other key gear. Anyone going in the backcountry and avalanche terrain should absolutely consider getting a helmet. We do see that 1 out of every 4 avalanche fatalities are due to trauma, and having a helmet is something that can help minimize consequences in the event that you are caught, or even if you're skiing and potentially have an injury just from skiing. Another really important piece of avalanche safety gear to consider having is an avalanche airbag. So a lot of people have seen these out there before, where you have a backpack that has an inflatable bag in it that you can inflate in the event that you're caught in an avalanche. When it comes to airbags, we definitely have some pros and cons. The pros of wearing an airbag are that when you activate the airbag, it will give you flotation in the avalanche by giving you a large amount of surface area. It can help protect against trauma. And the bottom line is, the major advantage of airbags is that they are absolutely proven to save lives. Basically, when it comes to avalanche fatalities, you have a 22% chance of dying in an avalanche if you're caught. But when you're wearing an airbag, that reduces those odds to only an 11% chance of dying. However, airbags are not a magic bullet solution. There are some cons. Some people don't use airbags because they are expensive and can be cost prohibitive. So they do cost anywhere from $600 to $1,500. Some people are put off by carrying the extra 5 or 6 pounds that an airbag weighs. And then the most important thing to understand is that while airbags can and do save lives, there is no guarantee that by wearing one, you're going to survive an avalanche. And we kind of see this in our data. So when we look at major avalanche incidents that have occurred in the GNFAC's forecast zones in the last decade, we have had 18 people who were caught in avalanches who were wearing airbags, but 40% of them, or 7 of those people, did die, even though they were wearing an airbag. The most common reason that people die while wearing an airbag is a failure to deploy it, which is usually an operator error where they just don't do it in time or just don't do it effectively. But you will notice that even when people deploy their airbag, they still can die. They can die for trauma, and they still can even be fully buried, depending on the avalanche that they're caught in. So bottom line is, airbags are great, they're effective, but having this gear doesn't replace good decision making. It doesn't guarantee we're going to survive. And so we still want to stay out of trouble rather than get in trouble. Okay, other things to think about besides my helmet and airbag, I want to make sure when I'm going in the backcountry that I have an emergency communication device that works. So I always bring my cell phone, even if it's not going to have cell service, because I like to use navigation tools, my inclinometer, my camera, and other apps on the phone. And then when I'm going backcountry skiing in places where I don't have cell service, I always make sure to bring along my satellite-based messaging device. So you've got two options there. You can either get a satellite messenger device like a Spot or a Garmin InReach that allows for two-way messaging. There's also a simpler device that just emits an emergency signal called PLB. Having the ability to call for help in the winter can absolutely make or break the outcome of an incident. So you absolutely need to have something that works in your party. Other additional safety gear to think about, you're going to want to make sure that you get a big kid pack that's capable of carrying all this gear that we bring in the backcountry. One thing we want to think about with our pack is just making sure that it has the ability to fit your essential rescue gear, your shovel and your probe zipped inside the pack. We don't want to strap that stuff to the outside because if we're caught by an avalanche, it could get ripped off our pack, and not having our rescue gear could cause a really bad situation. In addition to my pack, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm bringing some excellent insulating layers with me in the backcountry. Even on a really warm winter day, I need to realize that if I get injured, if I'm unable to move, or maybe I get kind of caught out longer than anticipated, it is really, really important that I have a bunch of different insulating puffy layers, that I've got a really good waterproof, windproof shell, and that I have really good protection for my hands, for my lower body, and for my eyes and my face as well. And then don't also forget the importance of just food and water. We've got to fuel the machine while we're out there, so we need to make sure we're bringing snacks, nutrition, hydration. Other things to think about, a map and a compass weigh nothing, and they're an excellent backup in the event that your cell phone battery dies. I like to carry a compass that does have a built-in inclinometer so I can measure slope angles as well as using that compass for navigation. And then even if you think you're just going out for a half-day tour, it is essential that you bring a headlamp every time you're going in the backcountry. As someone who did search and rescue for nearly a decade, I can't tell you how many times we had to rescue people who were accidentally benighted and they didn't have a headlamp and their cell phone battery would die in the cold because it doesn't last that long and you can't depend on it for a flashlight. So always, always have that headlamp. Other things to think about, having a backcountry repair kit is really important because if my skins malfunction or my binding breaks and I'm 8 miles away from a trailhead, that's a really big deal. And I need to be able to fix it enough so that I can limp out to the car. So I would say some ski straps are super important, skin wax, skin repair kit, zip ties, binding tools, and fire starting stuff is all really good stuff to have. You're definitely going to want to have some first aid supplies that are going to help you deal with minor things like blisters on your feet or small scrapes and cuts to major things like, let's say, broken bones you need to splint and a hypothermic patient you need to keep warm. And then finally, I do like to bring a super lightweight snow study kit with me. So at a bare minimum, I've got my snow saw, I've got my shovel as part of my rescue kit, and then I bring a cord for doing ECT tests, and I bring my little field notebook where I write out my trip plan, and I can also write down my observations of avalanches and snowpack and weather when I'm out in the field. The final thing to think about when it comes to all this gear is we want to make sure that every time we're going out in the backcountry, we are prepared for the worst. No one ever expects to get rescued. No one ever expects to get benighted. No one ever expects to get avalanche, but it does happen. And you need to seriously think about, if the worst thing happens, am I prepared? I do want to emphasize that being able to call for help is absolutely essential, and don't be afraid to call for help. So basically, when it comes to search and rescue, they are here to help us. It is a free service here in Gallatin County, and our SAR teams are awesome, but it's also going to take them a while to get to us, and they may not be able to reach us until the following morning. So worst case scenario, I not only need to be able to call 911 and request help, I need to be able to create some kind of impromptu shelter, whether that's digging a snow cave or rigging something with a tarp, and I need to be able to stay warm and stay put and hunker until search and rescue can reach me. So I really want to recognize that that does mean I can't go too crazy light and fast in winter, because that's going to really magnify consequences if something bad does happen. Finally, when it comes to your gear, you are going to want to make sure that you just develop some systems when it comes to all this stuff. So you're going to experiment with different pieces of equipment, and you're definitely going to figure out what kinds of things work for different trips, different times of year, different objectives. Once you figure out gear that works for you, you're going to want to develop a system for packing your backpack so that you pack it the same way every single time, helps keep you organized, helps you be able to find things in the event of an emergency. Another part of my gear system is that I incorporate gear checklists into my backcountry tour plan that I do every single day. So before I leave the house, I go through this checklist, making sure that I have all the important things on it. And I also go over this checklist with my friends at the trailhead, because even if somebody forgets just one thing, like a shovel, or they forget their headlamp, the consequences of that could be really big. So using checklists is a simple, quick, and effective way to make sure that all the things we need make it into the field each trip. And then finally, part of my gear systems is every day when I get home, I want to take some time to fix anything that I may notice isn't working or is broken. I want to recharge my radios, maybe swap out the batteries in my transceiver if I notice they're getting low. I also want to repair anything that's broken and just make sure that in general, I'm keeping track of my gear, staying on top of any recalls or warranty issues, and making sure that I'm bringing modern, fully functional gear into the backcountry with me each time. And then once I'm done kind of replenishing everything, maybe replenishing my first aid kit if I use stuff, replenishing my repair kit, I like to stick most of my stuff back in my backpack so that my pack is fairly packed and organized and contained and ready to go for my next adventure. All right, key points from today's talk is hopefully from this talk you realize that gear is pretty important to having a safe experience in the backcountry, and having the right gear can make or break our backcountry experience. Another key point is hopefully you realize that it's not just about getting the gear, but we actually have to take the time to practice with it and understand how it works. And then finally, we need to realize that gear is not a substitute for good decision making. It's easier to stay out of trouble than get out of trouble. And accident prevention really is our #1 risk management strategy when it comes to the backcountry. Thanks so much for hanging in there for this talk today. I highly encourage you to visit montanaavalanche.com, sign up for our advisory where you can have the forecast delivered to your inbox every morning. And then I will see you out in the field on the fundamentals day where we get to play with all this gear and really start seeing how it works. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.